The story begins in a prison where the police chief, accompanied by the guards, visits a prisoner who is in a special cell room. The prisoner was named Lee, a leader of a criminal organization who was known to be very cruel, sadistic, and had kidnapped many small children to become his army.
Every single one of those faces. Look at them very carefully. You don't know what we sacrificed to finally catch.
That's when tension arose when a prisoner who was mopping the floor suddenly attacked an officer, resulting in a shootout that caused all the officers to die. Meanwhile, the police chief was ambushed from behind and Lee managed to seize his gun. When all the officers were dead, Lee activated the alarm and freed all the prisoners. He could easily manipulate prisoners into rebelling with the promise of freedom.
Kalian bebas.
And yes, it is proven that Lee is a sociopath who is very manipulative, because apart from being sadistic and heartless, Lee is also good at controlling situations so that his goals can be achieved. Turning to another place, more precisely the coast in an area, there was a fisherman named Pak Romley who accidentally found the body of an unconscious man stranded. 2 months later, still in the same location, we will be introduced to a beautiful young doctor named Aylin Queenza, but usually called Aylin, who for the last 2 months has continued to faithfully care for the man who fell into a coma, whose identity is not known. Aylin also gave him the name Ismail.
Cocok kok.
And yes, Mail finally woke up from a nightmare where apparently he had amnesia or memory loss, which seemed to be caused by the wound on his head. Not only that, Mail also has a lot of scars on his body, which indicates that Mail is not a homebody or an ordinary person who lives in a peaceful environment. And for the time being, Mail will stay with Pak Romley, continuously supervised by Aylin himself.
Itu Pak Romli. Di situ tuh tempat di mana Pak Romli nemuin kamu.
Turning to another place, more precisely a port where there was a gangster boss named Anto along with his accomplice named Bondi who were waiting for Lee's arrival. Not long after, Lee appeared carrying a plastic bag containing chicken noodles. Anto deliberately invited Lee here to complain about his goods being impure and the weapons that Lee was selling were not original but made in China. So Anto broke off business relations with Lee right then and there.
Senjata dari lu order dari Cina. Bisnis kita selesai.
The reason why Anto brought so many men outside and inside turned out to be to kill Lee, who has the nickname Sea Devil or Father from Hell. If Anto succeeds in killing Lee, of course, it will be a plus point and an important point in Lee's criminal world.
Setan laut, lu pikir buat apa gua kumpulin orang-orang?
Without Anto realizing it, Lee also brought along 3 of his foster children who were very, very deadly, and one of them, nicknamed Iron, stepped in alone to finish off the Kroko who were outside.
Ini udah gua aja.
In this, we will see another of Liang's children, a woman named Rika who is no less dangerous, maybe even more sadistic and brutal. Rika managed to slaughter all of Anto's men using a knife. Anto himself died horribly after Lee stabbed him using chicken noodle chopsticks. Meanwhile, in Bondi, he managed to survive when he provided important information about a man found on the coast. According to the informant, the man had a close relationship with Lee, who was none other than Ismail.
Go to the hospital and check it out.
According to Lee Bondi's orders, he went to the hospital where Aylin worked. There, he acted defiantly in front of everyone, so Aylin immediately asked him to enter the room for treatment.
Mohon tenang, Pak.
While he was being treated, Bondi started asking questions about a patient he found on the coast. But Aylin refused to tell Bondi and immediately acted rudely, which disturbed Aylin.
Gimana, dokter?
Yes, Ismail immediately looked like a monster about to go on a rampage, and he almost killed Bondi if Aylin didn't stop him. Aylin also showed the X-ray results, which showed that something in the form of a bullet was still inside Ismail's head. Aylin also asked Ismail to come with her to Jakarta because the facilities there were more complete to be able to remove the bullet from inside her head, but Ismail refused the invitation.
Jakarta.
The next day, while waiting for the bus to Jakarta, Ismail and Aylin were unaware that the trio of murderers under Lee's care were watching from afar. They thought that Ismail was on the bus, even though he was only driving it. Right on a quiet road with left and right wilderness, the bus suddenly stopped when there was a car parked in the middle of the road, which was definitely a trio of killers. One of them immediately shot the driver brutally and then went inside to look for someone, namely Ismail. That's when Aylin called Ismail to ask for help. Because the person they were looking for didn't find the trio of killers, they immediately killed all the passengers very, very sadistically. Aylin and one daughter were left alive. The trio of killers lowered their guns at them, and who knows what happened next. Ismail himself seemed to have just arrived at the location. Romley's father was told to wait on the motorbike, while Ismail himself would check inside. How shocked Ismail was when he saw so many corpses lying with blood all over them. There was someone there who looked a lot like Aylin, but luckily it wasn't her.
Wow banget. Keren lo emang.
And yes, a cleaning team appeared tasked with cleaning up the corpses, where the grinning man immediately attacked Ismail, causing quite a tense fight. Ismail managed to kill the man before he set the bus on fire, but suddenly his friend appeared carrying a torch and... There were still two more criminals left outside. Ismail managed to knock out one of them, and when the other one was about to shoot, Pac Romley appeared who came to help. But unfortunately, he died and Ismail was paralyzed by police officers who came to the location. Meanwhile, Aylin is taken by a trio of assassins to Lee's headquarters, which is in a secret bunker in the middle of the forest where Bondi, who likes to talk, keeps babbling and commenting on the condition. So one of them was forced to kill Bondi because it was too noisy.
Gua bawa orang yang dia minta, terus gua banyak ngomong.
Return to Ismail, who is already at the police station being questioned by a chief named Mr. Alex. He showed Lee's file and told him who he was and how scary Lee was, that Lee was a figure who was feared not only by ordinary people, but even among criminals. He is very, very feared because of his sadism.
Membuat seluruh pantai berubah menjadi merah darah.
Many of the little children he has kidnapped are trained to be killers to be his loyal team, which Rika and his friends are apparently the kidnapped children. Now, he is his son who will be loyal until death.
Dididik untuk menjadi penyelundup, dia menjadi sosok yang mengerikan. Gembong kriminal di kepulauan ini.
Apa semua hubungannya sama saya?
And how surprised Ismail was when he realized that he was one of Lee's children. Whatever the detailed chronology, Ismail most likely rebelled or intended to repent, so that Ismail was no longer considered important to him and his group.
Lee.
That's when the lights suddenly went off, accompanied by the sound of gunshots coming from outside the room. When Mr. Alex was checking, he didn't realize that outside there was one of Lee's men carrying a machete, and suddenly... With his hands still handcuffed, Ismail couldn't do much when a man jokingly approached him. From there, a sadistic battle ensues that will make the brutal soul within you stir. Not long after defeating the man with the knife, Ismail, whose hand had been torn off, was again confronted with a grenade thrown into his room. When there was nowhere to escape, Ismail took cover behind the table and... After slaughtering the armed troops using Mr. Alex's gun, it was clear that they were just Lee's Croco. And because the real tension is just beginning, let me introduce you. They are Tano and Tejo, two of a trio of killers who are both under Lee's care, and it is clear that their abilities cannot be compared to the Croco that Ismail faced earlier. Tejo told Tano to turn on the lights while he would deal with Ismail alone using a shotgun. Here, the tension really starts to feel if Ismail, who doesn't have a weapon, has to survive Tejo, who is shooting blindly. It was while under the table that Ismail managed to count how many bullets he had put in, and when the bullets had run out, Ismail immediately attacked Tajoddin. Just when Tejo was dead, Tano appeared who wanted to fight using his bare hands, which of course Ismail was happy about because his shotgun bullets happened to be running out. What's interesting is that Ismail really uses the props or gimmicks provided by the creative team, such as cutting knives and paper to make weapons. Tano also really showed his strength when he blocked the knife using only his arm bones. That's not enough. Ismail returned to using the typewriter to withstand the Tano blow, which is unimaginable, the excruciating pain when our hands are pierced by the small irons in the typewriter. From there, Ismail began to master the fight and succeeded in defeating Tano. After Ismail finished slaughtering Tejo Tano and all his Croco, Lee soon appeared and called Tejo's cell phone to ask for the latest news. How shocked Lee was when he heard Ismail's voice, where Lee immediately sent the location of his base so that Ismail immediately came to save Aylin. Arriving in the middle of the forest, according to the location sent by Ali Ismail, we walked all the way to the middle. When he was thirsty, he found a dry well which finally made his memory slowly recover. It was at the well that Ismail and other selected children were left stranded for weeks without food or drink, and it is a kind of selection to see who will survive because one bottle of water can turn a child into a heartless killer.
Sebotol air bisa ngerubah bocah menjadi seorang pembunuh. Sang ayah dari neraka.
That's when the Iron appeared, who came not to invite him to rejoin, but was assigned to kill Ismail, who was no longer loyal to his own father, Ali. As usual, he uses his main weapon in the form of an iron stick, as his name suggests. The shotgun apparently wasn't enough to help Ismail defeat the Iron, as he had to be overwhelmed by the Swedish style of hitting the iron stick. But with a spirit of prosperity and strength, Ismail managed to injure the iron throat using his own weapon. Right on the beach, it was Rika's turn to face Ismail after all her friends died at the hands of those closest to her. Actually, Rika is in a bit of a dilemma between having to kill her own brother or betraying Lee to rebel. Because Rika chose to be loyal to her father from hell, they fought with drama. And finally, it was revealed that Rika was the perpetrator who had put a bullet in Ismail's head, for which Rika was willing to be happy and willing to die in return for the regret that she had done to him.
Kita impas.
Right at the same time, Aylin was approached by one Croconia Lee who took advantage of this opportunity to taste a doctor. The little girl helped him, and in the end, the two of them worked together to kill the Croco. Aylin and the boy continued to face several of Lee's men who were outside, and when there was no chance to escape, Ismail appeared, who suddenly entered and immediately finished them off. After Rika and the trio of assassins were killed, now is the time for Ismail to face his leader, aka his final boss, Lee. Lee looked so sad when he heard that all the children in his care had died along with his Croco. So Lee had no other choice but to kill Ismail, who was his favorite foster child. There was a fierce fight between father and foster son. Ismail was completely overwhelmed by the wrinkled claw technique used by Lee. From here, the intensity and tempo of the fight increases. With Ismail's memory having recovered, so his signature moves were successfully executed, but not enough to forget this father from death. And yes, Ismail was almost hit by a strong blow, which made the floor crack, which is why Ismail had to start getting serious about his fight. This was proven when he issued a series of regular punches, which made Lee start to suffer. Lee ran out. Ismail followed him, still using the same move. Lee managed to scratch Ismail's neck, but in these last moments, Ismail managed to control the situation until he stabbed Lee with a sharp stick, and that was the end of his story. Some time has passed, and now Ismail is in hospital in Jakarta with Aylin, who continues to faithfully accompany him. Ismail is currently recovering after undergoing surgery to remove the bullet from his head. When he recovers, Ismail promises to take Aylin to a very beautiful healing place.